agus Fulcherove go Ballykilcavan in Lower na Heron. Hello, you're very welcome to Ballykilcavan in the heart of County Laois. My name's David Walsh-Kemmis and I'm the owner here along with my wife Lisa. Ballykilcavan is my family farm and it's been in the family for 13 generations, so we've been here since 1639. And the farmyard around me here was built by, we think, the fourth generation of the family in or around 1780. So it's a very traditional farmyard for the time, lots of stabling for the horses, lots of other animal housing for the dairy cows and the pigs and so on. And then behind me here is the dovecot where we used to keep pigeons and doves. And right at the very top is the wind vane, which has the Walsh family griffin. So they used to brand everything with the griffin to show that it was the Walsh family household. What we've tried to do with this farm is to try and diversify it a little bit, because when I moved here in 2004, we found that just farming, just growing malting barley wasn't really enough to keep it financially viable. So what we've done, what we're trying to do here, is to open up a new brewery and a new visitor centre, and that's really what I want to show you today, to show you inside the brewery and show you what we're doing. So we're using our own malting barley, taking our own water from a well here in the farmyard right beside me, and making beers with it and sending them obviously all around Ireland, but also now into Italy, into France, and hopefully shortly into Germany as well. So if you'd like to join me, what we're going to do is go into the building behind me here now. The rectangular building is the old grain store for the farm, so that's where we used to store the grain here. It's now been converted into the brewery. And then the seven-sided building right beside that is the old mill building for the farm. So that's where we used to generate the power that was used to grind the grain, use that for bread making and for feeding to animals. And that's where we've installed our visitor centre. So I'll talk to you inside. So here we are in the actual brewery itself. Now, it consists of two buildings. So there's a building on my left-hand side, which used to be the old farm workshop, but that's a relatively modern building. That's only maybe about 100 years old. But the building on my right-hand side, we're going to go into in a minute, that's the old grain store. And that's where we used to store all the grain for the farm. So all the wheat, all the oats, all the barley would have been harvested, brought in here, stored on, there's about 2 floors above where we are standing now. It would have been brought in and stored on the sheaf, so they would have had the grain and the straw. And then over the winter, it would have been brought down and thrashed, and that's where they separated the grain from the straw. They would have kept the straw for bedding and then kept the grain for feeding animals and for feeding all the people on the farm as well. You can see the external wall behind me here, so it's a big thick wall, and all these buildings around here, to be fair, they're very well built. Whoever built them did a very good job of putting them together, and it means that my job of keeping them standing and keeping them restored is made that much easier. So big thick walls, and that would have kept it relatively warm in the winter and then relatively cool in the summer, because the heat gets in but it takes a long time to get into the building. So from a grain storage point of view, that was a very good idea. You'll see the big tall ceiling above me here, and that means just there was a lot of space to actually store the grain over the winter. And then behind me here you can see the archway, which is where the carts would have been able to drive in. So originally, when the grain was stored here, you'd have been able to drive your horse and cart into the building, take the grain and then drive out again. And behind me here, you'll see another arch. Now that was bricked in about 40 years after this building was built, in around 1820. And I'll show you the far side of that a little bit later on. What happened was they built the mill building the far side of this building, and then they were using the power from that mill building, and you can see the remnants of the shaft is still there. That was being used then to actually mill the grain, to grind the grain down. So they were using that then for making bread, for feeding animals, because animals prefer to have the grain crushed for them as well. Over my left-hand shoulder here, you can see the ventilation slots. So those brick slots in the wall were where they were bringing air in from outside the building to actually keep the grain cool, because when you're trying to keep grain for a long time, the two main things are to make sure it's dry and to make sure it's cool, and that means you won't get any growths on it, any fungi or anything like that that's going to make the grain go bad. So they had slots in the wall. They were actually angled slightly so that it meant that if you were a bird on the outside, you couldn't see any light the far side, but it meant that the air could come through. So they were able to ventilate the grain to keep it cool without actually letting any birds and hopefully any mice or rats in as well. In terms of what we've done with the building, we've basically put in these copper vessels that you can see behind me, and then the steel vessels on the right hand side, over on my right hand side. So I'll bring you up now and we'll show you what the different vessels do. So I'm now standing on what we call the brewing deck, and that's where these copper vessels behind me, we're taking our own barley and our own water from the farm. So we grow the barley on the farm here, we're using our own well water, and we convert those ingredients, and we add some hops as well, into what we call wort. And wort is really just a sugary liquid that we then put into the fermenters. We add the yeast in the fermenters, and then the yeast is converting that sugar into alcohol and carbon dioxide. So it's a kind of a 4-stage process here. The first stage is to mill the barley up, again like they would have been doing 200 years ago. Grind it so that you're turning it into a little bit of flour and a little bit of husk. And then we put that into the first vessel that's over my left shoulder here. That's called a mash tun. And you add warm water into that mash tun along with the barley. That then converts the starch that's naturally in the barley, converts that into sugar using enzymes, again, that are naturally present in the barley. So all we're adding at this stage is barley and water, and we're using the natural enzymes in the barley to convert the starch into sugar. After about an hour, all that starch has been converted, and we bring it into the second vessel, which again is the one just behind my left shoulder here now, and that's called the kettle. And it's called the kettle because actually what we're doing is boiling the liquid. We're calling it wort at this stage. We're boiling that wort for an hour. That sterilizes it, so it means that it's going to be safe to drink in the end because there's no bacteria, there's no fungi or anything like that in it that's going to cause anyone to be sick. And also we add hops in at this stage. And we're using hops for 2 things. One is for bitterness, so you're matching the sweetness that you get from the malt with a little bit of bitterness from the hops. And the second reason that we add hops is for flavour and aroma. So if you get a modern craft beer style and maybe an IPA that has a lot of hoppy flavours, there'd be fruity flavours, tropical fruits, citrus flavours, that's all flavour coming from the hops. We don't want to boil that for too long because those flavours will actually evaporate off. They're very what we call volatile, so they will disappear quite quickly if they're being boiled. So what we do generally is we put them into the final vessel here over my right hand shoulder, which is called the whirlpool. The whirlpool does 2 things. Again, we're putting in those hops to get the flavour and aroma, but we're also spinning the liquid around. Because there's bits of hops in it, there might be bits of protein in there, the solids in there that we want to take out before we bring it into the fermenter. So we spin it around and all the solids come into the centre. There's a force that pushes them into the centre, and then we take the clear liquid off and we bring it into one of the fermenters. So we're back down on the brew floor now. The brew deck is just up on my right hand side, and all these steel vessels that you see behind me are fermenters. So that's where we put the wort in and then we add the yeast. And yeast is a very simple organism, very small organism, and all it does really is eat sugar and convert that into alcohol and carbon dioxide. So the alcohol is obviously what we're using to make the beers alcoholic. The carbon dioxide, we let most of it out because we don't want to put too much carbon dioxide into the beer. But then at the end, what we'll do is we'll capture the final bits of carbon dioxide, and that's what we're using to carbonate the beer, to give the beer the fizz and to give the beer the head, the white head that you'll see on top of the beers. So all these fermenters behind me now are filled with beer. I'm just going to show you a fermenter in here that's actually actively fermenting away. We brewed it about 2 or 3 days ago, and you'll see behind me here, get it lined up, there's an airlock behind me here. So what that's doing is actually letting all the carbon dioxide that's been generated by the fermentation out. Because as I say, you don't want to keep too much carbon dioxide in the vessels because eventually you'll blow them up. So we let it out until it stops. That's really actively fermenting at the minute. You can see the bubbles coming out very quickly. So we want to let that out, and then maybe with about 3 days or 4 days into fermentation, what we can do is actually close that airlock down. We'd actually wind it down, so that means that more carbon dioxide is being kept in the vessel, and that will be absorbed into the beer, and that's what gives it the carbonation. The craft beer scene in Ireland is very, very competitive. The beer scene in Ireland is very competitive, so there are an awful lot of people making beer. We have to make sure that we can do something that makes us stand out from the rest of the other people who are doing it. So the first thing obviously is to make sure that the beers are good, make sure that the quality of the beer is good and that people like the flavours. But after that then there's still an awful lot more. So there's branding, there's marketing, there's making sure you get your distribution right. But for us, the 3 main things that we kind of stand out for, what we're trying to make sure that people know us for, are our ingredient provenance, our sustainability, and also the stories behind the farm. So for us, having this 13 generation, 380 year farm is really, really important. It means that we can use that as marketing. We can tell all the stories of the people, both the family and the workers who've been here over the last 3 or 4 centuries. And we're really grateful that we have that material because it makes it really much easier for us to market the beers and sell the beers, both in Ireland and particularly for export as well. In terms of differentiation, we're using our ingredients, the history of the farm, but also sustainability, which is really, really important for us. We were delighted we won the National Small Firms Association Sustainability Award about 2 weeks ago. So that's like an overall in terms of the entire country, and for small firms we were deemed as the most sustainable business that entered those competitions. So that was a really important thing for us. It's what we're trying to do is reduce our energy usage, reduce our water usage, get rid of single-use plastics. The ingredients provenance is very important because we're using our own local barley, getting it malted locally and bringing it back, so the footprint on that, the carbon footprint on that is very small. We're generating our own power. We have solar panels on the roof of the brewery here as well, so that's very important. And community support, very, very important as well. So, making sure we're sponsoring the local soccer team, we're letting groups in onto the farm for free, so walking groups, local schools, arts groups, things like that people want to come in and have a look around. We've just brewed a beer for Ukraine, so all the proceeds, 100% of the proceeds that we made from that beer are going to the Red Cross for helping the humanitarian effort in Ukraine. So things like that are really important for us, because I think we've got a lot of support from the community, and it's nice for us to be able to give something back. Being on a farm, biodiversity is also very easy for us to do, and it's a nice one for us to do as well. So we've put in wildflower meadows, wild grass meadows. We have a wild bee colony in the farmyards that we started the tour in outside. We have red squirrels here, our native red squirrels, so we're making sure we're supporting them, and we have a barn owl box over in one of the other sheds as well. So it's, I think, again, previous generations have looked after this farm really well in terms of the biodiversity. I want to make sure that I can continue that as well. So when we built the brewery, the brewery's actually only been here since 2018. So we started the company in 2017. We were brewing off-site for a few years using someone else's brewing equipment, and then built this brewery in 2018. But right from the very start, we didn't want to just build a brewery because, as I've said already, the brewing scene is very competitive. So we have to do different things and new things to other people. So we always wanted to put in a visitor centre behind us as well, and make sure that people could come and see us. It's the best form of marketing as well, is to get people onto the farm, get people to come into the brewery and see how we make the beers. So I'm going to bring you into the mill building behind us here, and we'll show you what's in here. So you might remember outside we had the rectangular building, which was the old grain store that's now the brewery, and then in front of that we had what on the outside is a 7-sided building, but on the inside it's actually circular, and this is the building I'm standing in at the minute. It's the old mill house, it's the old mill building for the farm. We think it was put on maybe about 40 years later, after the grain store was put in, because you can see the archway that had been blocked up in the grain store. And then they were using this mechanism behind me to actually generate the power that was being used in the grain store to grind the grain. There's a race behind me, well, basically a canal that comes in from the river, and that brings the water all the way. It's about 800 or 1,000 metres from the river to here. The water then goes under this building, drives this mechanism, and then that's being used to generate the power for running the mill. Behind me over my left-hand shoulder you can see a wheel that they put in later on. So once the river level started to drop, they put in an extra wheel, and then they were able to put a steam engine outside, and they were able to run the power from that instead. We've converted it into the visitor centre now, so we kind of leave it bare at the minute, and then what we'll do is whenever we have a group coming in, we can set it up for however the group wants it to be. But you'll see the roof above me here, which my father actually restored back in the 1990s. It was actually starting to fall in, so he just re-roofed it, but in the same style as it was done originally. And then we've just tiled the floor, we've put in a little bit of a viewing platform down so you can see the original wheel. Now again, the river level has actually dropped at this stage, so there's no water actually running under this building at the minute, but you can still see it down into the original wheel. And then what we'll do is we'll bring people in to do, eventually to do tastings in here. We can do food and beer pairings, bring them for a walk around the farm, tell them all the stories, because people are really interested in stories. They're interested in heritage. They like meeting people from the family to bring them around these properties as well. So I do the tours, bring people around, go into the brewery, show them how we make the beers, and then bring them out here and give them a few samples afterwards. So I hope you've enjoyed that very quick tour around Ballykilcavan. If you'd like to know more about us, you can find us on the website ballykilcavan.com, or we're also Ballykilcavan on Instagram, Facebook and Twitter as well. Anyone who wants to come and visit us, we'd be delighted to show you around, and thanks for joining us.